Welcome friends, gathered in the sanctuary on Zoom and later on our YouTube channel. It is so good to be together as we finish celebrating Women's History Month. Of course, we celebrate women all the time. Yay. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Franklin, to the Smoky Mountains of Western North Carolina and Northeast Georgia, and the ancestral land of the Cherokee people. We're a lay-led congregation of progressive minds and caring connections. My name is Mary Teslo, and I'm pleased to be your service leader this morning. We're delighted to have live piano music this morning played by Carla Woodmansee. Oh, what a joy. Her prelude hymn was number 101, Abide With Me. We extend a warm welcome to visitors. Looks like we are not with visitors this morning. I don't know on Zoom whether we do. Looks like everyone's well known to us, which is fabulous. As we gather on each Sunday, we take a moment to greet each other on Zoom and here in the sanctuary, affectionately the Zoomies and the Roomies. Roomies, please rise in body or spirit for our wave hello and stay standing for our gathering song. Wave hello to the Roomies by turning to your right and waving to, just above the door to the camera, and our Zoomies will be there with us. And now, our gathering song, Spirit of Life. So Miss Jude and Jill are away this morning at urgent care. So Carla's gonna play Spirit of Life for us, and we're gonna do our best.
Okay, I'll give a slight introduction. Okay, I'm sure you'll know when to come in.
Yeah. Connection reminds us that despite our distance, we are all part of one loving community. We appreciate our Sunday service team, Warren, Becky, Ben, Edgar, and Penny on Zoom. Angie's our greeter this morning, and Karen has helped with hospitality. There's an opportunity to sign up downstairs at Celebration Hall for either of these chances to volunteer. All right. I was ready to say that COVID and other viruses have receded as it's gotten warmer, but I got news this morning that the gathering of unity and community at the Carpenter Center in the last few days sometime had a COVID outbreak. So Mary Ann has COVID, so Casey is on Zoom, and Betsy's also been exposed. So we encourage everyone to be on Zoom or stay home and take good care of themselves. Those of us here, please feel free to make use of masks at the entrance and social distance. And we want folks to let us know, or let our President Bonnie know, so that folks can be informed and take good care of themselves. We encourage folks to keep current on their vaccinations, and a reminder that we request folks to let Bonnie know. Please be sure to keep up to date by checking the UU View, our website, and the bulletin board downstairs in Celebration Hall. Our fellowship is a light for liberal religion in the mountains that values diversity and the richness it brings to our community. Our celebration of diversity is reflected in the variety of our Sunday services. In addition to different topics, our service sequence and length sometimes varies. We hope today's service enriches your journey of discovery. As Unitarian Universalists, we draw from many sources, including the words and deeds of prophetic people. As we conclude Women's History Month, today's service honors Margaret Fuller, the radiant genius and fiery heart of the Unitarian Transcendentalist movement, and arguably our earliest feminist author. We're delighted to welcome back Reverend Marti Keller. Reverend Marti has been a parish, community, and justice minister for the past 25 years. Prior to becoming an ordained UU minister, she was an activist and legislative advocate for more than 20 years in the arena of women's rights, maternal and child health, adolescent pregnancy, and economic equity. And she's still a big activist, yay, for sure. After the service, there'll be an opportunity to chat with Reverend Marti, first on Zoom and then in Celebration Hall during social time. Our chalice lighting is by the Reverend Selena Fox. We kindle this flame with love for mothers and for mothers, past, present, and future. We kindle this flame in celebration of community and its generations. We kindle this flame with respect and support for the greater circle of life of which we are all a part. Our opening words are from Margaret Fuller. The first reading this morning comes from Margaret Fuller's prophetic book, A Woman in the 19th Century, published in 1845. This book had an important and lasting effect on the empowerment of women and became a Bible of sorts for the early movement of women's rights. Margaret's combination of transcendentalist Unitarian spirituality with practical agitation proved electrifying and inspiring to those in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York, for the first women's suffrage convention. And this piece is from Standing Before Us. We would have every arbitrary barrier thrown down. We would have every path open to women as freely as to men. Were this done and a slight temporary firmament allowed to subside, we should see crystallizations more pure and of more various beauty. We believe divine energy would pervade nature to a degree unknown in the history of former ages, and to no discordant collision, but a ravishing harmony of the spheres would ensue. I believe that, at present, women are the best keepers of one another. Let them think, let them act, till they know what they need. Our opening song is Venetian Boat Song number 2 by Mendelssohn.
We changed that.
You're going to change that?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
To Abide With Me. It was a hymn that would have been sung during Margaret Fuller's time.
Wonderful. Very fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to introduce you. I'm going to welcome you. Thank you, Carla. I'm sorry I got those turned around, but beautiful. Please join me in welcoming back with us Reverend Marti Keller.
I think I was surprised to learn that Abide With Me was Unitarian. You too? I mean, it seems like such a classic Christian hymn, but it definitely was. And I like to think of Margaret Fuller and all these people, and Louisa May Alcott. They all lived in Concord, and they went to the big Concord church on the hill, and they were singing and playing that song, so it really meant a lot to me. The second reading this morning is also from Women in the 19th Century by Margaret Fuller. I think this excerpt is actually very well written, but I have to share with you that even in Margaret's lifetime, some people thought she wasn't the best writer in the world. The Transcendentalists were a combination of being very turgid and very flaky, and some of that was reflected in their writing. It kind of went on, and it was very like, anyway. But I like this one, and if you think that she wrote this, as when she wrote it, it's pretty amazing. From Women in the 19th Century again. I have urged on women independence of man, not that I do not think the sexes mutually needed by one another, but because in women this fact has led to an excessive devotion, which has cooled love, degraded marriage, and prevented either sex from being what it should be to itself or the other. I wish women to live first for God's sake. Then she will not make an imperfect man her God and thus sink to idolatry. Let's hear it, women. I want to read that again. That is so cool. It's not that I'm anti-male, please. Okay. Then she would not make an imperfect man her God and thus sink to idolatry. Then she will not take what is not fit for her from a sense of weakness and poverty. Then, if she finds what she needs in a man embodied, she will know how to love and be worthy of being loved. Yay. By being more of a soul, she will not be less woman, for nature is perfected through spirit. Now there is no woman, only an overgrown child. Margaret Fuller. First aired on the heels of an unprecedented terrorist attack on this country and a newly launched war in the Middle East, arguably the marker cultural phenomenon of 2 decades ago, at least the marker television cultural phenomenon of 2 decades ago, was American Idol. How many of you watched American Idol? Yeah, so, you can be Unitarian Universal and watch that show. The #1 rated television show in the country for 8 years running. It is still on the air for part of each year on Sunday and Monday nights. In fact, it started on Oscar night. So for those of us on the East Coast, and that thing went on and on, it started early this year, the Academy Awards, and still went on to 11. We did not stay up to watch the opening of American Idol, but if you were on the Pacific Coast, you might have grabbed something to eat and gone back to it. But anyway, it has a fraction now of its original viewership. But in its heyday, as they say, it launched what has been called a platoon, I love it, a platoon of bona fide musical stars, such as Kelly Clarkson, Jennifer Hudson, Carrie Underwood, Chris Doherty. These are people that are known to us, and they're still pretty active, with scores of Billboard chart toppers. On any Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night, there were 50 million or so TV viewers, 50 million, now it's 8, 50 million to 8, who watched to see who Simon would dryly trash, whose singing performance was too pitchy, or pitch perfect, and then text message in their vote, a kind of balloting I had yet to master 20-something years ago. I am not too proud to say, as a Unitarian Universalist ordained fellowship minister of 25 years, that I was usually among them, cheering for my favorites, puzzling over those who seemed to slip on through by virtue of their smiles or their fashionable pouts, never voting, mind you, but captivated, just captivated by the possibility that the bank teller from Detroit or the church choir singer from North Carolina might get picked and then go gold. That is until the amazing, talented, and out and proud gay singer Adam Lambert lost that year to a bland, hetero fellow competitor, swept in by a growing base of evangelicals who organized American Idol voting, began skewing season after season. I don't know if any of you who watched it. All of a sudden, if you weren't like an evangelical Christian, you weren't going to win, because they just loaded up that text messages and the vote went there. This huge disappointment, and then more than a smidgen of generational disappointment, when during one Idol competition, the 20 finalists were asked to name the person who inspired them. And I'm going to wait 1 minute and let you think. The person who inspired you. One person. And all of them selected family members. Each one of them selected family members. Mothers who woke them up and forced them to go down to audition. Their grandma, their brothers, their fiancés. I realized the inclination was towards a kind of "this is dedicated to the one I love" moment. But the question, as I chose to hear it, was about inspiration, which for me invoked, yes, the everyday notion of practical encouragement. So yes, mom got you up to go to your auditions or your music lessons, but also the loftier notion of prophetic muse, who inspired you, who prophesied to you, who made you who you are, who made you better than you could be, who was the man or woman whose vision or deed shaped them. Oh, I know that's asking a great deal of contestants in a singing competition, as we are often reminded, but it is my fantasy that if for some reason, now get this, I was ever in the hootenanny version American Folk Idol, that when my moment came to stand in front of the camera and name my inspiration, to make my dedication, then I would say Joni Mitchell, whose lyrical contributions were, you must agree, or not, often prophetic. Not the lines about moons and Junes and Ferris wheels, which were pleasant and memorable, but the ones that foretold of paving paradise and putting up parking lots, or her native Canadian indictment of the United States, her adopted country, that had already come to inspire so much terror in others. And isn't that prescient today? We have all come, she sang, to fear the beating of your drums. And when she urged us to imagine a cosmic change with bombers flying shotgun in the sky, turning into butterflies across our nation, we knew we were in the imaginative, far-seeing presence of someone who was convinced there was a better way that we needed to return to. And that's what prophecy is. You were looking backward and said, this is where we needed to be, and we've moved very far away. It was the stuff, for me, of Elijah and Isaiah. What do you think? Joni Mitchell, Elijah, Isaiah? Her soaring, circular words, her singular, shining, prophetic presence. It is gratifying to witness the new round of acolytes and indeed adoration that's coming to her, because she had a terrible, terrible stroke. I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and she wasn't seen. She's gotten better, and she's all over the map now. So I'm really glad to see that happen. Biblically speaking, there were only 7 women recognized as prophets or prophetesses: Sarah, Miriam, Deborah, Abigail, Huldah, and Esther. In the most traditional sense, prophets are those who are believed to be speaking on behalf of God directly or on behalf of spirits. Another more expanded but accepted definition is that a prophet informs a community about what they are doing wrong. As I said, how they are deviating from the path expected from them and urging them, sometimes naked, right? If you remember the stories in the Bible, naked prophets, urging them to change their ways. When I think about our transcendentalist Unitarian prophetess, Margaret Fuller, it is in that same sense a charismatic woman with a bold, brilliant, and critical mind who, as she wrote, as she wrote, a thirst for truth and good, not love of sect or dogma, a kind of idol in her own time. She wasn't blonde and singing like Joni Mitchell. She was dark-haired and scribbling incessantly, hundreds of words and articles and essays and speeches and journal entries over her tragically brief life. I will admit that I knew very little about Margaret Fuller. I haven't asked you, how many of you know something about her? A little bit. When I was first asked to serve on the selection committee for the Margaret Fuller Awards program of the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation, and there you are, Mary also did this job at one point. She chaired the Margaret Fuller Committee, yay. I knew she was one of our famous women, I knew that, who was part of a circle of Concord, Massachusetts intellectuals who were considered seminal figures in the 19th century philosophical, literary, and political renaissance in New England, called the American Bloomsbury. You know, there's the English Bloomsbury. That group's been called the American Bloomsbury. They were so amazing. So much happened out of that little group of people. The group that included, how many of you know any Transcendentalist people? Shout it out. Emerson. And they called him Waldo, by the way, not Ralph Waldo, but Waldo. Thoreau. Marginally, yes, I would include her, and Nathaniel, her father, kind of nuts, but yes, her father, and Nathaniel Hawthorne. Okay, they all lived in Concord at one time. Oh, I went to Walden Pond with my daughter. This is parenthetical, it's not in here. I went with my daughter on a Transcendentalist road trip in Massachusetts earlier this year. We met each other in Boston, and we drove up, and we parked at Walden Pond, only to discover you can't actually not walk around very, very easily, because the first thing that happened, I got on the path and I fell over and tripped on a branch. But I did have a chance to see how close Walden Pond really was to the city of Concord. I don't know if you've imagined this out somewhere, and you got Thoreau. He was living in this little house, by the way, but he very regularly went home to have his sister do his laundry. And people brought him food a lot, so I just wanted to correct the record on Walden Pond. What I soon learned as I joined the group of lay and ministerial colleagues whose wonderful task was to solicit and select scholarly and creative and justice-seeking projects by contemporary women was that she was and still is a significantly under-recognized prophetic voice for our liberal religious heritage. As Elizabeth Stady Canton, very well known, and Susan B. Anthony wrote of her, Margaret possessed more influence on the thought of American women than any other woman previous to her time. You're hearing this from Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. With her famous Boston Women's Conversations, her editing of the Transcendental Journal, the first kind of literary journal in the country, The Dial, and later her book, Women of the 19th Century, the first major book on feminism by an American author, Fuller urged women to develop their potential to participate equally with men in the world. Does that sound very radical? Yeah, it was. Being a curious and diligent, and I'm sure Mary was like that, funding panel member, I gathered more details about Margaret from the biographical sketches available in collections of Unitarian and Universalist women's writings, like Standing Before Us. I want to say that this year 2 new books have come out about Margaret Fuller, and I want you to consider reading one. One is called Finding Margaret Fuller, and it's a novel. It's a novel based on her life. So this author speculated about what it was like for her to go to Italy and meet this man, and did she really marry him, and what happened on the way back. Anyway, it's a novel, and it was creamed in the New York Times Book Review, just by this person who said nobody should ever write literary fiction about famous people. And the other one is called Bright Circle. And it's the story of the Margaret Fuller Conversations, and it just came out. It's about the 5 major women who participated. So after going along a long time and not having much about Margaret Fuller, 2 new books have come out this year. She was born to Unitarian parents in Cambridge in 1810. Her father was a liberal politician and a supporter of equality for women. He educated his already precocious daughter at home for several years, instilling in her principles of independence and moral courage, which he derived from both his own progressive beliefs and study of Greek and Latin writers. She knew both of these languages by the time she was 6 years old. And if she didn't know these languages, she was in big trouble with her father. Timothy was a really aggressive parent, and he saw how bright she was. So when she was 6 years old, she was expected to know those languages. It has been written that Margaret reached adulthood as a formidably intelligent, but socially eccentric and not conventionally attractive, but by many accounts, electric and sensual young woman who was either intensely disliked or intensely admired, but who could never be ignored. One of her contemporaries described her as, and I think you can relate to this, not beautiful, but more than beautiful. A sort of glow surrounded her and warmed all those who listened. She has been called the sexy muse for her male colleagues, and was undoubtedly the model for Nathaniel Hawthorne's adulteress Hester Prynne in The Scarlet Letter. Ooh. In the 1830s and 1840s, Fuller, as the editor of The Dial, for which she was never paid, she had a contract to get paid, but these transcendentalist men just didn't happen to pay her, became a member of the famous Transcendentalist Circle. In fact, the only woman, besides perhaps Elizabeth Peabody, with any regular presence among them. In fact, and you had talked about it earlier, if there was a prophet, mentor, and muse for her, it would have been Ralph Waldo Emerson, whose home she was guest in for a length of time on several occasions, staying up all night for intimate bedside talks with him, more intimate than his wife preferred. She took long walks with Nathaniel Hawthorne by the riverbanks. With the aging Reverend William Ellery Channing, she read German Romantic philosophy and theology. Theologically, transcendentalism is a commitment to find the divine in the human endeavor in concert with nature, consistent with Fuller's conviction that religion was in her own heart, writing that in terms of religious institutions, she belonged nowhere. I have pledged myself, she declared, to nothing. I have my own church where I am by turns my own priest and my own laymen. In other words, she was an original nun, N-O-N-E. I'm sure we've talked about it here, people that don't go to church. There's Margaret. I have pledged myself, she declared, to nothing. Yeah. The Constitution, and they had one, of the Transcendentalist community, to whose principles Fuller covenanted to adhere for a time, was ethically very demanding. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. They collectively vowed to promote what they saw as the great purpose of human culture, to establish the external relations of life on the basis of wisdom and purity, to apply the principles of love and justice to our social organization, and to substitute a system of what they call altruistic cooperation for one of selfless competition. And they ran some of the original communes. They were little socialists. Didn't know how to do it very well and often starved because they didn't really know how to farm, but they set up some of those first communities. As lofty and challenging as the demands for human betterment were for all of the members of this club, the barriers still existing for women around access to formal education and vocation made it even more daunting for Margaret and the few other women in the circle. While the Transcendentalists asserted that there is no sex in souls, the outer world still had many boundaries for women. In still Puritan Boston, Margaret Fuller was refused admission to Harvard. Only partly daunted by this educational wall, she was able to procure all the books that Harvard Divinity School was assigning to their students. In 1839, at the age of 28, she set up reading circles for 25 women, partly in her home, but mostly in Elizabeth Peabody's foreign language bookstore. And if you want to show, I forgot to have you show Margaret. So let's show the bookstore, and then we'll show Margaret. The slide is her bookstore. Yeah. Do you have the slide back there? Yeah. There you go. That's the bookstore. And you know what? It isn't on the tour of what kids go visit in Boston when they do their Unitarian Heritage Tour. There it is right there. And can you throw up the slide of Margaret Fuller so we can see whether or not she was beautiful in spirit, not beautiful, and there she is. And there's from women in the 19th century. So let's leave that up there so you can take a look at her. And so she set up this conversation club. Many of them, the women who came, were the wives of those transcendental intellectual giants who had gone to colleges through the front gate, charging, and I love this, substantial tuition to these women, equivalent to Harvard's in some cases. She achieved an admirable degree of economic independence, at the same time inspiring in them a desire to learn and converse, versus the customary needlework and idle gossip which Margaret forbade. And I think some of you know this quote, and you can join in me. Do your minding, not your mending. Let's all do that. Do your minding, not your mending, she demanded as she lectured, something largely off limits publicly for women of her era. They were not allowed to go on the lecture circuit like Ralph Waldo Emerson. They were not allowed to preach in Unitarian pulpits. What she had was a conversation group in a bookstore that she charged a lot of money for, where she taught a lot on art, mythology, faith, education, and yes, women's rights. Besides her spellbinding talks on such a range of topics, she asked them to probe what she was always probing in herself. And I want you to think about that for a minute. What she wanted, the main question for Margaret Fuller was, what was I born to do? What were you born to do? What were we born to do? And to ask themselves, were they or would they ever be all that a human being is capable of becoming? What are you born to do, and are you moving towards what you have the ability to become, a full human being? A full human being, Margaret Fuller. It was said of her that her conversation was seldom heard equaled. In fact, Emerson thought her the most entertaining conversationalist of her time. Some of the money she earned had to go, because she was an unmarried woman, to pay for board with a married couple, because being an unmarried woman in Boston at the time, she was not allowed to live by her own, so she had to pay somebody else to live with them. Some of the rest of it she used to finance her own private anti-slavery campaign and other justice causes. While her Boston reading and discussion circles were truly legendary and have been transcribed and used as a model for similar teas and conversations among UU women, I don't know if you've ever done one here. We did them all over for a while. They were really cool. So imagine you all get up in your hats and your gloves and your stuff, and you bring your teapots and you have little sandwiches, and either the teenagers or the men do the serving, depending on what you feel. They're very wonderful. You should consider having one. The best documentation for a prophetic social witness came from the pieces she did, both news and critiques, for the New York Herald Tribune. As she moved away from New England, and in many ways the insular and disconnected from social reality company of this club of transcendentalists who hung out in Walden Pond, to the much grittier, sobering, emerging city of New York. There she was hired by the famous editor Horace Greeley to write literary reviews in 1844, the first American woman to hold this position. He called her the most remarkable and, in some respects, the greatest woman America had ever known. Not content to remain a reviewer, she took a trip to what was then the Western frontier. And what do you think the Western frontier was? No. Described in a book called Summer on the Lakes, the lives of the settlers in Illinois and Wisconsin, and the destitute survivors of the native tribes that had been replaced. Moving from arts and literary critique to social witness and critique, she explored the dark corners of New York City. Imagine she grows up in Concord, Massachusetts, and goes to Boston, and she hits New York City when it wasn't doing awful well, where it was beginning to be a very poor and dark place to live, producing stunning reformist exposés of the conditions in prisons, asylums, almshouses, and institutions for the blind. Among her most radical and far-sighted observations were about the plight of women prisoners, when in the 1840s authorities began jailing them for prostitution and public drunkenness. Few women reformers would come to the aid of women in jail because these reformers wanted to avoid risking their own status as respectable middle-class ladies. One woman, who was it? Our Margaret Fuller did, noting in print that there was a need to help these discharged females, becoming one of the first to argue that economic and social forces bring women into prostitution. She said she'd always felt a great interest in these women, who she wrote were trampled in the mud to gratify the appetites of men, and wished fervently to be brought into more direct contact with these women. At the Bellevue Almshouse, Fuller found people who received decent physical care, she wrote, but sat staring in what she described as vacant boredom. She called for books and education to help them find jobs. The conditions at Toone's prison she found barbarous, the air in the upper galleries unendurable, she wrote. Fuller's articles on asylum and prison reform all stress the same theme, that kind care begets good results. Like all prophets who look at the world through their own humanness, no matter how ardently they invoke the divine, Margaret had her blind spots. Can you guess what they might be? Her blind spots. For one, she failed to see the abysmal physical conditions beneath the tidied-up for holiday visitors surface of the mental wards that cried out for change, and had an attitude towards Irish immigrants who came fleeing the potato famine that was at best condescending and at worst hate-provoking. She warned her readers at the, and I apologize, how many of you are of Irish descent? I apologize, okay? I'm not saying it, Margaret did. She warned her readers that the Irish were foolishly romantic, extremely ignorant, blindly devoted to the church, lazy and ungrateful. Ooh, Margaret was not yet 35 years old when she wrote 3 especially harsh and damning columns on what was deemed the Irish character. Columns defended at the time because at least she called for tolerance and patience in educating them rather than violence and deportation. Does that sound familiar today? Intrigued by the Italian Revolution, she went there as a foreign correspondent, met and perhaps married a young Italian nobleman and bore his son. On a visit home to America, their boat shipwrecked off Fire Island, New York, within sight of shore, and she was only 40 years old when she died. And what we know now from some of the journals is that she was obsessed with thinking she was going to die by drowning. She was terrified of water. So going to Europe to begin with and coming back was like terrifying to her. And so it's a really amazingly horrible ending that she had. I would like to imagine that a searching and sensitive a soul such as Margaret would have continued to evolve in her understanding of the conditions of new immigrants, those she saw as other, that even this blind spot in her prophetic nature would have been opened up to enlightenment. We don't know. No matter, Margaret Fuller remains more than a distant historical figure to me. She has been a prophet for new generations of Unitarian Universalists and will continue to be so long as we keep her visionary work and her story alive, which is one reason I'm up here today at the end of Women's History Month, to tell you about her. Her life might have been pitchy in places, off-key, off the mark, but for me at least, she still is my American prophetess and my American idol. Thank you.
Marty, thanks so much for that inspiring gift to us. Wow, that's awesome. Our words of gratitude. We're grateful for all the inspiring and caring women and girls in our lives. We're also grateful to live in covenant with our fellowship family and for all the diverse gifts of time, talent, and treasure that are given by so many in love and in hope. You are invited to give generously and joyfully as you are willing and able. Our dear Jude is taking care of Jill, who has a raging case of pink eye, so she's not here to give us a draggy update, but just to remind you that individuals who pledge now can earn this wonderful dragon pin. So we have our dragon pins for those who offer time, talent, or treasure. So please see me afterwards if you haven't yet gotten one, but have pledged. And now please join me in the dedication of our gifts. Gifts given in love and hope continue a cycle of love and hope. May it be so. Thank you for your support, and all financial gifts are appreciated. There's an offering plate at the sanctuary entry where there are stamped self-addressed or addressed envelopes to mail. Donations are also welcome electronically, including the PayPal link on our website and the UU View. And there's the celebration jar here and a basket for donations for coffee hour downstairs in Celebration Hall. As we prepare for joys and concerns, please know they'll be edited out before they're being posted online. So we don't have visitors with us, so we're all well known, but we're going to do something very special today. A few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of visiting First Existentialist congregation in Atlanta called First E to hear Reverend Marti and to visit with her husband Richard. The congregation takes great joy in celebrating milestones and uses tambourines and maracas and other instruments to sing happy birthday, among other things. They also add a few claps and have birthday people come to the front. So we're going to give this a try today, and Marty's going to help us along with Carla for happy birthday. So we're going to do it right now for all our March birthdays. So they include Clark, who was on Zoom before and hopefully is still there, Martha Tree Thomas, Dina Brown, our own Barbara James, Marge Abel, and me, and Brenda Fern Mira. So Barbara, why don't you join me in front, and maybe Clark's still on Zoom? Yes. And Marty will help us.
Celebrant should have the instruments.
No, you do.
Anybody
It's part of
who
the
wants
celebration.
it.
So this is what we do. So shall I just sing a cappella? Yeah.
Sure. And then Carla will help us along.
Okay.
Extra mic, up to the microphone, please.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, all March birthday people. Happy birthday to you. It's the claps that are really important.
Worship, excuse me, always appreciates having your feedback. So if you enjoy that. And First E also does anniversaries and other milestones, so we might keep adding this to us. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. We take this moment to reflect on our joys and concerns and acknowledge the mutual support of our community. If you would like, you're welcome to say a brief or special joy or concern, and I'll drop a pebble into the water. We'll begin with those on Zoom, followed by those in the sanctuary. And sanctuary folks, we invite you to line up over by the piano. Do we have anyone on Zoom? A last pebble as we remember those who have spoken, those who have been named, and those we hold in silence in our hearts. We now invite you to take a minute of silence. You can choose to meditate, pray, reflect on something you've heard here today, or simply sit silently in community with others. I'll bring you back with the chimes. Our closing hymn is 21, and we're going to invite those in the sanctuary to stand. And Carla, we're going to do the first verse through twice.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
And since, I'll just give an introduction, because I think most of you know this. Is that okay? I think everybody knows the tune, so, okay.
So
Wonderful. Nice to sing together. A reminder also to the Zoomies that you're welcome to borrow a hymnal so that you'll be able to sing along. So you can let Penny know if that's something you'd like to do, and we'll arrange for that. Our closing reading is responsive reading 576 for those here in the sanctuary. I'll be reading the plain text, and Angie has agreed to help with the response. For the Zoomies, the first 6 stanzas, the response is, "It will not matter." And then there's a closing response. So 567, a litany of restoration. If, recognizing the interdependence of all life, we strive to build community, the strength we gather will be our salvation. If you are black and I am white,
it will not matter.
If you are female and I am male,
It will not matter.
if you are older and I am younger,
It will not matter.
if you are progressive and I am conservative,
It will not matter.
if you are straight and I am gay,
It will not matter.
if you are Christian and I am Jewish,
It will not matter.
if we join spirits as brothers and sisters, the pain of our aloneness will be lessened, and that does matter.
In this spirit, we build community and move toward restoration.
Thank you, by Reverend Marjorie Bowens Wheatley. Our chalice extinguishing. As we come to the end of this service, may we depart from our time together, buoyed by the spirit of life, delighted by the warmth of our gathering, and renewed in soul and mind. As we extinguish the flame of our chalice, may its lingering spark be carried in your heart until we are together again. Thank you for joining us today. Following service, those on Zoom are invited to continue the conversation, and those in the sanctuary are invited to social time in Celebration Hall. Also, our Girl Scout cookies didn't arrive at the beginning of the month, but they're here today. So, yay, Girl Scout cookies. And Reverend Marti will stop by Zoom and then join us for coffee and social time. Next week, we welcome back Tret Fury for a message and music service. There will also be a listening room concert on Saturday, April 5th at 2:30 here in the sanctuary. So before we leave, here's a preview of Tret Fury.
Sitting in this circle with my humble guides, surrounded by the ones I love, protected on all sides, breathing out and breathing in, and holding all that's though the world around me shatters, I center on this time. If for just one moment we are still beneath the dark and the dreary, if we could shine a light so strong, we may not feel so weary. Just one moment we are still beneath the dark and the dreary. If we could shine a light so strong, we may not feel so weary. Breathing out and breathing in, I center on this time, for I am sitting in this circle with my humble guides, surrounded by the ones I love, protected on all sides.
Please rise in body or spirit. Those in the sanctuary may choose to hold hands. You can be here. Yeah, we can do it. Yay. Join me in we all, almost all connected. There we go, there we go. Yay. And our slide? Wonderful. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and community is its goal. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. So may it be. Let's wave goodbye to our Zoomies, and our Zoomies will wave back to us. Yay. Wonderful. Great to see everybody. Go in peace. The service has ended.